The morning began like any other for James Reeves. He woke up at 5:30 a.m., completed his workout routine, and prepared for another day protecting Victor Chen, the powerful CEO of Quantum Technologies. For 15 years, James had been Victor's shadow, his constant protector, and in many ways, his most trusted confidant. James checked his phone as he did every morning. There was a message from HR requesting a meeting at 9 a.m. This was unusual, but not concerning. Perhaps it was about the upcoming trip to Singapore for the tech conference. James showered, put on his perfectly tailored black suit, and headed to the gleaming Quantum Technologies headquarters. The security team nodded respectfully as he passed through the lobby. James had trained most of them personally. He was not just a bodyguard but a security advisor who had built the company's protection protocols from the ground up. "Morning, James," said Maria from the reception desk. "Mr. Chen is already in his office." James nodded, but instead of taking his usual route to Victor's office, he headed to the HR department on the fourth floor. The halls were quiet at this hour, with most employees not arriving until 9:30. Lisa Chen, the HR director, no relation to Victor, was waiting for him. Her face was tight, professional, but there was something in her eyes that made James's instincts flare. Something was wrong. "Please, take a seat," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. James remained standing. "I prefer to stand." "What's this about?" Lisa pressed her lips together. "I'm afraid I have difficult news. Quantum Technologies is terminating your employment, effective immediately." The words hung in the air. James felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach, but his face remained impassive, a skill learned from years of professional neutrality. "On what grounds?" he asked, his voice steady despite the shock. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics. The company has decided to move in a different direction with its security team. You'll receive a generous severance package, of course." James thought of the countless threats he'd neutralized over the years. The time in Dubai when he'd spotted a suspicious package and evacuated Victor minutes before it exploded. The night in New York when he thwarted an attempted kidnapping. The countless travel arrangements he personally checked and double-checked to ensure Victor's safety. "I'd like to speak with Victor," James said firmly. Lisa shook her head. "Mr. Chen is unavailable. He asked that this transition be handled discreetly. Security will escort you to clear out your personal items." As if on cue, two security guards appeared at the door. Men James had hired and trained himself. Their eyes couldn't meet his. 15 years of loyal service ended in a 15-minute meeting. James was walked to his office, where he collected the few personal items he kept there: a photo of his parents, a medal from his military service, a rare coin Victor had given him after a successful trip to Moscow. His security access was immediately revoked. His company phone was collected. The security team walked into his car in uncomfortable silence. "I don't understand," James said to Mike, the head of the security team who had been his deputy for 7 years. "Was there a complaint? Did something happen?" Mike looked pained. "I'm sorry, James. Orders came from the top. That's all I know." As James drove away from the building he had protected for 15 years, questions swirled in his mind. Why now? What had changed? And why would Victor not face him personally after all they had been through together? James didn't know it yet, but his termination was just the beginning of a story that would shake Quantum Technologies to its core. James Reeves sat at his kitchen table, staring at his phone. 3 weeks had passed since his sudden termination from Quantum Technologies. For the 20th time that day, he scrolled through his contacts, stopping at Victor Chen's name. For 15 years, he had been just a call away from the CEO. Now, his messages went unanswered. The apartment felt too quiet. After years of constant movement, flying to international meetings, scanning crowds, coordinating security teams, the stillness felt unnatural. James had built his entire life around protecting Victor. Now that purpose was gone. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, putting down the phone. He needed to move forward, not dwell on the past. But the question kept returning. Why was he fired? The first week after his termination, James had expected some explanation. Perhaps Victor would call to explain it was all a misunderstanding. By the second week, confusion turned to anger. By the third, a heavy sadness set in. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. An unknown number. "Hello," James answered, trying to keep the hope from his voice. "Is this James Reeves?" asked a woman's voice. "Speaking. This is Diane from Elite Security Services. We received your application, but I'm afraid we won't be moving forward with your candidacy." James sighed. It was the fourth security firm to reject him this week. "May I ask why?" A pause. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics. We wish you the best in your job search." The call ended before James could respond. He placed the phone down gently, though he wanted to throw it against the wall. Something was happening behind the scenes. Someone was poisoning his reputation in the security industry. His savings would last a few more months. After that, things would get difficult. The severance package from Quantum was generous, but the cost of living in the city was high. James had never worried about money before. His salary had been excellent, and his lifestyle modest. The doorbell rang. James approached cautiously, checking through the peephole, an old habit from years of security work. It was Mike, his former deputy from Quantum. "Can I come in?" Mike asked, looking nervously over his shoulder when James opened the door. "I can't stay long." Mike declined coffee, remaining standing in James's living room. "Look, I shouldn't be here. If anyone at Quantum found out I was talking to you." "What's going on, Mike?" Mike lowered his voice. "Things are strange at work. New security protocols, new surveillance systems. Victor has become different. Paranoid. He's watching everyone, especially the executive team." "That doesn't sound like him," James said, frowning. "The day before you were fired, you questioned the new security upgrades, right? The ones that included internal monitoring." James nodded slowly. "I told Victor it seemed excessive to monitor employee communication so extensively. It raised privacy concerns. Well, after you left, those systems were installed immediately, and not just the ones you knew about, more extensive ones. There are rumors that Victor is collecting personal information on the executive team." James felt a chill run down his spine. That's not just unethical. Parts of it might be illegal. Mike looked at his watch. "I need to go. I'm sorry about what happened to you. You deserve better." He headed toward the door, then turned back. "One more thing. Are you applying for security jobs?" "Yes, but no one will hire me. Victor has blacklisted you. He told the board you were fired for ethics violations." "It's all lies, but no security firm will touch someone with that kind of mark against them." After Mike left, James sat in silence, processing this new information. Victor wasn't just firing him, he was destroying James's career and reputation. But why? What was Victor hiding that was worth ruining a 15-year relationship? James walked to his closet and pulled out a small lockbox. Inside was a notebook where he had documented security concerns over the years. Maybe the answers were already in his possession. It was time to start investigating. James spent the next 2 weeks going through his notes. 15 years of service had produced 5 thick notebooks filled with security reports, concerns, and observations. He had always been thorough, a habit from his military days. Each entry was dated and detailed. He hoped to find something that might explain his sudden dismissal. On a rainy Tuesday morning, his doorbell rang. James wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, he approached the door and looked through the peephole. No one was there. He opened the door slowly and found a small package wrapped in brown paper. No return address, no delivery service markings. James picked it up carefully, checking for any signs of tampering or danger, another habit from his security days. The package was light, likely containing just documents. He placed it on his kitchen table and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "You deserve to know the truth. Be careful who you trust." James stared at the USB drive for a long time. It could contain malware designed to spy on him. It could be nothing, or it could hold the answers he was seeking. Curiosity won out. He took out an old laptop he rarely used, disconnected it from the internet, and inserted the USB drive. It contained a single folder labeled Quantum Surveillance Program. James clicked on the folder. Inside were hundreds of files, emails, security system plans, and meeting recordings. He opened the first document, a memo from Victor Chen to the head of it. "Implement Phase 2 of the monitoring system immediately. Focus on executive communications. All emails, texts, and calls must be accessible. Prioritize Anderson, Patel, and Garcia. Their loyalty is in question. James frowned. Anderson, Patel, and Garcia were all board members who had recently questioned some of Victor's more aggressive business strategies. The date on the memo was just 1 week before James's firing. He opened more files. There were transcripts of private phone calls between executives and their families, screenshots of personal text messages, records of websites visited. One file contained photos taken through laptop cameras of executives in their homes. "This is illegal," James whispered to himself. The most disturbing document was a psychological profile of each executive, noting their weaknesses, personal problems, and pressure points. Next to these profiles were strategies for leveraging this information to ensure compliance. James felt sick. This went far beyond normal corporate security. This was systematic invasion of privacy and psychological manipulation, and based on the timestamps, it had started about 6 months ago, around the time Victor had begun acting strangely. The final file was an audio recording from 3 days before James was fired. He recognized the voices immediately, Victor and Lisa from HR. "James is asking too many questions about the new security systems," Victor said, his voice tense. "He's been with me 15 years, but I can't risk him interfering with this. He has too much integrity." "Are you sure about this?" Lisa asked. "He's been incredibly loyal. That's precisely the problem. His loyalty is to his principles, not to me. He would blow the whistle if he knew what we're doing. Get rid of him. Make sure he can't work in security again. I don't want him talking to anyone in the industry." The recording ended. James sat back, stunned. He had been fired not for doing something wrong, but for having too much integrity, for potentially standing in the way of Victor's surveillance scheme. James looked again at his notebooks. In the most recent one, he had documented his concerns about the new security systems Victor wanted to implement. He had questioned the need for such invasive monitoring. That questioning had cost him his job. Now James faced a difficult choice. He had evidence of illegal surveillance and corporate espionage. Should he go to the authorities, confront Victor, or walk away and try to rebuild his life? The choice was clear. Someone had risked their job to get him this information. He couldn't let Victor continue to spy on and manipulate people, but he needed to be smart about his next move. Victor had power and resources. This would require careful planning. James picked up his phone and started searching for investigative journalists who specialized in corporate misconduct. It was time to fight back. James Reeves sat in the corner booth of a small coffee shop 10 blocks from his apartment. He had chosen this location carefully, far enough from quantum technologies to avoid running into former colleagues, but public enough to feel safe for a first meeting. His laptop was closed on the table, the USB drive secure in his pocket. Across from him sat Sarah Chang, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate wrongdoing. At 35, she had already won 2 major journalism awards for her work uncovering data privacy violations at major tech companies. Her most recent series on corporate surveillance had caught James' attention. "So let me get this straight," Sarah said, keeping her voice low. "You believe Victor Chen, one of the most respected tech CEOs in the country, is illegally spying on his own executives?" James nodded. "Not just believe, I have proof." He tapped his pocket where the USB drive rested. "But I need to know what I'm getting into before I share it. Victor has resources. He's already destroyed my career." Sarah studied him carefully. "Why did you contact me? Why not go to the authorities?" "Because Quantum has deep connections in this city. Victor donates millions to political campaigns. I don't know who I can trust." James hesitated. "And to be honest, I needed someone who understands what's at stake here. This isn't just about me. It's about dozens of people having their privacy violated." Sarah took a sip of her coffee. "If what you're saying is true, this could be a major story, but I need to see the evidence. And you need to understand what will happen once this goes public. Your name will be attached to this. Victor will come after you with everything he has." "I know the risks," James said, his face serious. "But I spent 15 years protecting that man. I believed in him and what he was building. Finding out he's using that power to control and manipulate people." He shook his head. "I can't walk away from this." Just then, James's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I know you have the files. We need to talk. Meet me at the old security office tonight. Come alone. M. James stared at the message. M could only be Mike, his former deputy. Was it really him? Or was it a trap? Everything okay? Sarah asked, noticing his expression. I'm not sure, James replied, showing her the message. This could be my former colleague, or it could be someone trying to lure me out. Sarah frowned. Don't go. It's too risky. But if it is Mike, he might have more information. He's still inside Quantum. As they debated, James's phone rang. It was his bank. The call was brief but devastating. His accounts had been frozen due to an investigation into suspicious activity. His credit cards were also blocked. Victor's making his move, James said grimly after hanging up. He knows I have the files. He's cutting off my resources. Sarah looked concerned. This confirms your story, but it also means you're in danger. You need to decide right now, are we doing this story? Because once I start investigating officially, there's no turning back. James faced the hardest decision of his life. Moving forward meant becoming a whistleblower against one of the most powerful men in the tech industry. It meant potential legal battles, financial ruin, and possibly worse. Walking away meant allowing Victor to continue his surveillance empire, manipulating people and violating their privacy. He thought about the psychological profiles he'd seen, the notes on how to exploit executives' personal weaknesses, the photos taken through laptop cameras of people in their homes, unaware they were being watched. Let's do it, James said firmly. But we need to be smart. If Victor's already freezing my accounts, he's desperate. That makes him dangerous. Sarah nodded, opening her notebook. Tell me everything from the beginning. Leave nothing out. As he began to share his story, James glanced at his phone again. The message from M still showed on the screen. Should he risk meeting his former colleague, or was it stepping into a trap? Either way, he had crossed a line. There was no going back now. Against Sarah's advice, James decided to meet Mike at the old security office. It was a risk, but he needed more information. The building was mostly empty after hours, with only a night guard who recognized James and let him in without questions. I wasn't sure you'd come, Mike said, stepping out from the shadows of the empty office. He looked thinner than before, with dark circles under his eyes. I almost didn't, James admitted. How do I know this isn't a trap? Mike handed James a folder. Because I'm risking everything by being here. That's why I couldn't text you details. Victor has everyone's communications monitored. Inside the folder were employee complaints filed with HR, all related to strange tech issues on company devices. Webcams turning on by themselves, missing emails, odd sounds during phone calls. All these were dismissed by HR, Mike explained. But look at the dates. The complaints started exactly when the new surveillance system was installed. James flipped through the papers. Victor is monitoring regular employees too, not just executives. It's worse than that. Last week, Marcus Johnson was fired. He was a junior programmer who complained about his laptop camera activating randomly. That's just one person, James said. 3 days ago, Victor called me to his office. He showed me a video of Marcus at home, talking to his wife about looking for another job. Victor knew exactly when and where Marcus was interviewing. He made sure those interviews didn't go well. James felt cold. He's following them outside the company? Mike nodded grimly. The new security system includes a backdoor into company devices. They still work when employees take them home. And that's not all. Mike explained how Victor had started gathering teams of developers to create what he called enhanced monitoring tools. The project was highly secretive, with components divided among different teams so no one could see the complete picture. We need proof of all this, James said. What I have on the USB drive isn't enough to show the full scale. I can get you system access codes, Mike offered. But it would have to be soon. Victor's becoming more paranoid every day. He's starting to suspect everyone. As they talked, Mike's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face turned pale. What is it? James asked. Emergency security meeting called by Victor. In 10 minutes. Mike showed James the message. He only does this when there's a suspected security breach. He knows we're meeting, James realized. You need to go, act normal. Mike headed for the door but stopped. Be careful, James. Victor's not the same person anymore. Last month, He had me follow Barbara Patel home because she questioned his new product strategy in a board meeting. After Mike left, James called Sarah from a public phone outside the building. "I got more information," he told her, "and I think we can get system access codes to prove everything." "That's good," Sarah said, "but I've been busy too. I found 3 former Quantum employees who were fired in the last 6 months. All of them report strange stories similar to yours: sudden termination, blacklisting in the industry, financial problems afterward." "Victor's eliminating anyone who might expose him," James said. "Exactly. And I've been looking into Victor's background. Did you know his first company failed because his business partner stole his ideas and customer data?" "No," James replied, surprised. He never talked about his past. "It happened 15 years ago, right before he founded Quantum. The experience seems to have left him with serious trust issues. One source suggested he had a complete breakdown." James thought about the timing. 15 years ago was when Victor had hired him as security. Now things were starting to make sense. Victor's surveillance wasn't just about corporate control. It stemmed from deep-seated paranoia and fear of betrayal. "We need to move quickly," James told Sarah. "Victor knows something's happening. He just called an emergency security meeting." "Come to my office first thing tomorrow," Sarah replied. "Bring everything you have. It's time to go public with this story." As James hung up, he noticed a black SUV with tinted windows slowly driving by. It matched the vehicles used by Quantum's security team. His instincts screamed danger. Victor wasn't just watching anymore. He was making moves. James didn't go home that night. The black SUV circling the block was enough warning. Instead, he checked into a small hotel using cash and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Old security habits were proving useful now that he was the one being watched. By morning, he had made his decision. Before taking everything public with Sarah, he needed to confront Victor directly. One final attempt to understand why his former boss had changed so drastically. He sent a text to Victor's private number, one that few people knew. "We need to talk. Just you and me. The Golden Gate Park Japanese Garden, 2 p.m. today." James didn't expect a reply, but one came almost immediately. "Come alone." The Japanese garden was a good choice for their meeting. Public enough to be safe, but with many private corners for conversation. James arrived 30 minutes early, scanning the area for security personnel or anything suspicious. At exactly 2 p.m., Victor appeared on the stone bridge crossing the koi pond. He looked thinner than James remembered, his face drawn with dark circles under his eyes. The confident CEO was gone, replaced by someone jumpy and suspicious. "I wasn't sure you'd come," James said as they stood facing each other. "Curiosity," Victor replied coldly. "I wanted to see what you'd say to justify betraying me." James felt a flash of anger. "Betraying you? After 15 years of protecting you, you fired me without explanation and destroyed my career." "You're asking too many questions about the new security systems," Victor said, his eyes constantly moving, scanning the garden. "I couldn't risk you interfering." "Those systems go far beyond normal corporate security, Victor. You're spying on your own employees in their homes, recording their private conversations. That's illegal." Victor's laugh was bitter. "Don't talk to me about loyalty or ethics. Everyone betrays you eventually. I learned that the hard way." "With your first company," James said, "your partner stole your ideas." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You've been investigating me." "I'm trying to understand what happened to you. The Victor Chen I knew for 15 years wouldn't do these things." "That Victor was naive," he snapped. "Do you know what happened after David stole my work? He became a billionaire. I lost everything. My wife left me. I nearly killed myself." Victor's voice shook with emotion. "I swore I would never be vulnerable again." "So you built Quantum," James said, "and hired me to protect you. And for 15 years, it worked. But the business is bigger now, the stakes higher. I need to know everything about everyone. Information is control." James shook his head. "This isn't about corporate security anymore. You're destroying people's lives because of your paranoia." "It's not paranoia if they're really out to get you," Victor hissed. "Barbara Patel met with my competitors 3 times last month. Anderson was planning to vote against my new product line. I know because I saw their messages, heard their calls. That's normal business, Victor. Disagreement isn't betrayal." For a moment, Victor seemed to consider James's words. Then his expression hardened. What do you want from this meeting? Money, your job back. I want you to stop the surveillance program. Delete the data you've collected. Get help, Victor. This path will destroy you and Quantum. Victor studied James carefully. And if I don't? Then everything goes public. The surveillance, the illegal recordings, the psychological manipulation. All of it. You have no proof that would stand up in court. I have enough to start an investigation, James countered. And once that begins, they'll find the rest. Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're making a dangerous mistake. I built Quantum from nothing. I won't let anyone take it from me. This isn't about taking anything from you, James said. It's about stopping you from hurting more people. The two men stood in silence, the gentle sound of water flowing beneath the bridge the only noise. 15 years of history stretched between them, trust now replaced with suspicion. You have until tomorrow to decide, James said finally. After that, I can't stop what happens next. As James turned to leave, Victor called after him. James, I never wanted it to be this way. James paused but didn't look back. Neither did I. Walking away, James knew Victor had already made his choice. Tomorrow would bring war. The next morning, James woke to his temporary phone buzzing frantically. It was Sarah, calling earlier than their planned meeting time. Turn on the news, she said when he answered, her voice tight with urgency. Any channel. Now. James grabbed the hotel room remote and switched on the TV. Every news channel showed the same scene. Quantum Technologies headquarters surrounded by police cars and news vans. The headlines scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, Tasty Giant Quantum under federal investigation for illegal surveillance. What happened? James asked, stunned. We weren't going public until next week. It wasn't me, Sarah replied. Someone else leaked the story. The FBI raided Quantum's offices at dawn with a search warrant for all their servers and surveillance equipment. James sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. Victor will think I did this. There's more, Sarah continued. Check your email. I sent you something 10 minutes ago. James opened his laptop and found Sarah's message. It contained a link to a website that hadn't existed yesterday, quantumtruth.com. The site was filled with internal documents from Quantum, emails between Victor and his security team, and video clips from the surveillance program. Someone had dumped everything online for the world to see. Who did this? James asked. I don't know, Sarah admitted. But whoever it was had deep access to Quantum systems. The leak is massive, thousands of files. As James scrolled through the documents, he found something that made his blood run cold. A series of emails between Victor and a private security firm discussing handling the James Reeves situation permanently. He was planning to have me killed, James said quietly. What? Are you sure? It's coded language, but I recognize it. This security firm is known for solving problems permanently. Victor was going to move against me after our meeting yesterday. James continued scanning the leaked documents. Many were familiar from the USB drive, but there were newer ones too. The most recent was a memo from yesterday evening, after his meeting with Victor in the park. The memo outlined Project Clean Slate, a plan to erase all surveillance data and destroy the hardware before anyone could discover the full extent of the operation. It was scheduled to begin at midnight last night. The leak stopped him from destroying the evidence, James realized. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. James, have you seen the video section of the site? He hadn't. When he clicked on it, he found dozens of recordings from the homes of Quantum executives. Private moments with their families. Conversations in bedrooms. Children playing. It was a devastating invasion of privacy. This is worse than I imagined, James said. Victor wasn't just looking for corporate betrayal. He was obsessed with controlling every aspect of their lives. The most disturbing video showed Victor himself, alone in his office late at night, watching multiple surveillance feeds of his executives at home, making notes on their personal habits and relationships. Did you see that? Sarah asked. Yes, James replied. He looks unhinged. Sarah finished for him, like he's completely lost touch with reality. James's phone buzzed with a text from Mike. It was me. I leaked everything. I'm sorry, But I couldn't wait. Victor ordered us to destroy all evidence last night. I had to act. I'm at the FBI office now. As James processed this revelation, breaking news flashed across the TV screen. The reporter looked solemn as she announced, "We're getting reports that Victor Chen, CEO of Quantum Technologies, was found unconscious in his home this morning from an apparent suicide attempt. He's been transported to Memorial Hospital in critical condition." James felt his world tilt. Despite everything, he had spent 15 years protecting this man. The thought of Victor trying to end his life was devastating. "I need to go to the hospital," James said. "Are you sure that's wise?" Sarah asked. "The FBI will want to talk to you about all this." "They know where to find me," James replied. "First, I need to see Victor. There are still questions only he can answer." As James rushed out of the hotel room, his phone kept buzzing with news alerts. The quantum surveillance scandal was exploding across all media. The story he had wanted to expose carefully was now a wildfire, burning out of control. Memorial Hospital's security was tight, but James knew how to navigate such situations. He approached the front desk with confidence. "I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Chen is in the intensive care unit. Only family members are allowed to visit," she replied firmly. As James turned to leave, a familiar voice called his name. It was Lisa from HR, looking exhausted and worried. "James? What are you doing here?" she asked. "I came to see Victor," he explained. "Is he going to be all right?" Lisa looked around carefully before speaking. "The doctors say he'll survive, but," she lowered her voice, "the board has already voted to remove him as CEO. The scandal is too big, and the FBI wants to question everyone in senior management." "I need to see him, Lisa. There are things I need to understand." Something in James's voice must have convinced her. Lisa nodded and used her access card to lead him through security to the IQ. Victor lay in the hospital bed, looking small and vulnerable. Various machines monitored his condition. His eyes were closed, but they opened when James entered the room. "You," Victor said weakly, "come to see your victory." James sat in the chair beside the bed. "This isn't a victory for anyone, Victor. Why did you do it? Not the surveillance. I understand that came from your fear of betrayal. I mean trying to end your life." Victor turned his gaze to the ceiling. "Everything I built is gone. My reputation, the company, all destroyed." "Quantum will survive this," James said. "The technology and products are still valuable. The company just needs new leadership." "Why are you here, James? After what I did to you. After what I planned to do." 15 years is a long time, James replied simply. "I wanted to understand what happened to the man I respected." Victor was quiet for a long moment. "After David betrayed me with my first company, I promised myself it would never happen again. The surveillance started small, just watching key executives for signs of disloyalty. But I found comfort in watching, in knowing everything. It became an addiction." "You need help, Victor, professional help." "It's too late for that. The FBI was in my hospital room an hour ago. They're charging me with multiple federal crimes." James leaned forward. "It's never too late to make things right. Cooperate with the investigation. Help them understand the full scope of what happened." "Why would you care what happens to me now?" Victor asked. "Because I remember the Victor Chen who built Quantum with a vision to change technology for the better. That man still exists somewhere inside you." 6 months later, James stood at the podium in a conference hall filled with security professionals from across the tech industry. After the quantum scandal, he had been approached by several tech companies asking him to help build ethical security protocols. "The quantum case teaches us an important lesson," James told the audience. "Security should protect people, not control them. Technology without ethics becomes a weapon." His new consulting firm, Reeves Security Ethics, was now working with major tech companies to establish privacy standards and ethical guidelines. His experience had become a powerful credential rather than a career-ending disgrace. As James finished his presentation, he noticed a familiar face in the back of the room. Sarah Chang gave him a small wave. Her series of articles on the quantum scandal had won her journalism's highest honor and brought much-needed attention to corporate surveillance issues. After the talk, they met in the lobby. "Great speech," Sarah said. "How's the new venture going?" Better than I could have imagined, James replied. Companies are finally taking privacy seriously. And have you heard about Victor? She asked. James nodded. His testimony helped the FBI identify other companies engaging in similar practices. The judge reduced his sentence in exchange for his cooperation. From what I hear, he's getting therapy in the minimum security facility, Sarah added. My sources say he's actually making progress. As they walked outside into the bright afternoon, James reflected on the strange journey of the past year. He had lost his career, faced danger, and exposed a massive scandal. But in doing so, he had found a new purpose, ensuring that what happened at Quantum never happened again. The most unbelievable thing, James said as they paused in the sunlight, isn't that a powerful CEO became so paranoid he built an illegal surveillance empire. It's that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. James had lost his job after 15 years for no apparent reason, but what happened next had indeed been unbelievable. He had found his true calling, protecting people's privacy rather than just their physical safety. Sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one.